Hey, thanks very much. Thanks for making out this morning as well. It's quite a keen start. So I gave a presentation at Guadec about the idea of using the free desktop, using GNOME as a way for teaching programming. The idea that we could find a particular target market that we feel is not well served by software and the tech industry at present, and then deliver something better than what they could get in other places. So kind of find people, find contributors, find people who build technology, and we want to give them control of technology, and then bring them into free software. Two people came to me actually after my talk and raised the same concern. So one of them was Nobik, and he was saying, well, you know, you have these things in Endless, this is great, you're teaching people how to code, but are you teaching them how to code free software? Are you teaching them these tools and these languages? I was like, well, actually, first we have some things which are teaching JavaScript. Okay, maybe you could do some web development in these things. We have some things which are teaching Unity, right? You can go to games development, and these are skills which, if you learn them, you can then go to have a career, and you can earn money and you know, make your millions with these technologies. What about us? What about the free desktop? What about free software? The other people who came to me actually was Stella and Sigu, who work on advocating GNOME in Kenya. And they saw the same problem. Right? They have interns and they run code camps. They have Google Summer of Code projects where people are learning how to hack on open source software. They're learning all of our good stuff, all of our tools, things like Meson. And then, okay, great, what do I do now? How do I get a job? Well, you learn something else and you go and work for someone else who's not using these things. So we have a problem of capturing value within our ecosystem. So, you know, free software is a great training camp for all of these amazing skills, which once you've shown them, they're on your GitHub profile, and then Google hires you and you disappear, or Facebook hires you and you disappear. So how do we close that loop? Right? What do we actually need to build to improve that? The goal of Endless is actually to give people that, to give people control of their technology, to give people the opportunity to actually participate in, you know, what I would call this kind of digital economy. We talk about this concept of digital agency. And I think building an app store and actually having a kind of a closed system, a kind of an ecosystem and an economy around free and open source software is absolutely essential for us to succeed at this goal. Right? We want everyone to be sitting at a free software system that they can get the source code and they can control. We care about that because that means they have control of their computer, they have control of their information. But that has to work for them, right? That has to make economic sense for them. It has to pay their bills and put a roof over their head. So, right, app stores. Why do we need an app store? Why do we care about this? Right, we have distros. There are 20,000 packages in Fedora, whatever. All of them are fonts. But there are great things that already exist in the world. Why do we need to go and build something different and change it and introduce this this evil money? Right, Nobik struck through profit on his presentation. So why do we need to change that? And this is market store, right? The idea here is curb appeal. So we, the free desktop community, are trying to welcome people into free software. We're trying to put something in front of them that is appealing. We want them to put their phone down, to put their iPad down, and to sit down at their Linux desktop and spend their time and energy within our system. So it has to work for them. It has to be appealing. It has to look nice. It has to have the tools that they need to get their job done. So they need to come in and do something that they want to get done. Right? They need to have an app that meets their specific use case. They might be a carpet fitter, right? Carpet fitting applications that measure the carpet you need. I had a friend who worked on this. No free software carpet fitting application, right? But then if that guy doesn't have a carpet fitting application, he can't do his job, so he's not going to use our system. So there are a million applications like this that we need someone to care about it. It needs to exist. Otherwise, when that person gets their new Endless laptop out of a box from Asus, the first thing they do is like, I can't do my stuff, and then they delete Endless. And that's what's happening at the moment, right? So we are building all of these systems to get people in, to get people contributing, to get people using, and then we lose them. The other thing that for me is incredibly important about the idea of a kind of an economy sustaining free and open source software is this idea of inclusivity, right? There is a certain selection process, and there's a certain bias and a certain prerequisite that you need to have the rights and to have the ability to take part in free software projects. You need to have electricity. You need to have a computer. You need to have free time. Like, you need to have, your kids are in bed or someone else looks after them, and then you can spend all night hacking or doing whatever it is that you're doing to support your free software communities. So this is a diversity problem. This is an inclusivity problem that prevents people from getting into our development process and into our community. So we need to actually give additional motivations and additional reasons for people to be able to take those journeys, right? Why is it worth me spending my time writing software for you if I actually have to go and work or I have to feed my family or whatever? So we cut a whole bunch of people out just because we have a system that, relies solely on altruism, but then there's a requirement for people to also look after themselves and their family. So there's a tension here. And ultimately, it speaks to this sustainability, right? So we bring people into the system, we teach them how to use it, and then they become contributors, but in order to earn money, then they go somewhere else, right? So we have this stairway to nowhere, potentially, right? Obviously, there are people here who are lucky, myself included, to be paid to work in free software, but that is a minority of paid software jobs in the world. So if we want free software to be the thing that people use, it has to be the thing that people make money with as well. The system needs to be a closed loop that can grow. So I guess I'm speaking here in almost two capacities. Endless is hoping to help build this, but I don't want it to be for Endless. I want it to be for GNOME. I want it to be something that's larger, something that's for the free desktop. Whatever we build is about software freedom. That's the first thing I said. We're not trying to make a trade of freedom against money. If we're going to build something through the community, through the GNOME Foundation, then we can't make a trade-off of freedom for money. We're going to, okay, sell your apps, and then actually we'll just forget the principles that we're founded on and those things that we're all here to actually support. This needs to be additive. We can't trade one thing for another. Hopefully we all agree with this. Hopefully we're all here for the same reason. Make the app king, queen, other monarchs are available. Computing on a desktop is turning into this kind of miserable web thing where you need 64 gigabytes of RAM just so that Chromium can keep 12 Slack tabs open. It's terrible, right? It's a terrible experience in terms of giving people control of their data, in terms of giving people good power performance. We have solar-powered computers with Endless where, you load Slack and boom, that's it. You could have been using your computer for 6 days, but now it's right, the source code to those web apps and things. So the idea that you actually want people on a desktop computer to be using native apps, which have been made with love and care, and they have a good experience, and they actually do better work for you, and they do a better job for the user, that's really important, right? So we want to promote that concept. Pay what you want. So fix one accessibility and inclusivity problem by switching it for another. We can't say, oh, well, if you can't afford to write free software, then we're going to pay you, but now if you can't afford to buy it, then you can't have it, right? So this idea that we can encourage people and try to build a kind of sharing economy where people are actually motivated or nudged or, a little bit of arm twisting, but we have to make it possible for people to still take part in our ecosystem as users without placing barriers in a different place. And vendor neutral, right? I'm from Endless. I want this to happen in GNOME, so we can at least say that this isn't just for Endless users. Ultimately, if Endless builds this for everyone else and millions of people use it outside of Endless, then that's a success for me. That's a success for Endless because we are trying to promote this concept of software freedom everywhere. So we don't want a disincentive for participation from particular vendors by tying it into one system, into one technology or something that's going to make a would-be competitor situation, or I'm not going to put that thing because it's theirs, right? And yeah, platform neutral, right? So there are many different Linux systems around. People acquire Linux through different vendors, through different distributors. The technology has to work in as many places as possible. Because otherwise we're not closing this loop to bring as many people in and helping a system that kind of builds and propels itself. And ultimately, sustainability, right? So this has to pay for itself to a certain extent. We can rely on sponsors to some extent, but we have to be able to fund what we're doing and keep funding what we're doing. So in terms of building blocks that we're looking at, what do we have today? I mean, the game changer here that actually enables us to even have this presentation is Flatpak. And thank you, Alex, and the decades of other people who've also put work into containers and dbus and all of the magic stuff that actually means that Flatpak can exist today. And you know, some people have criticized the Linux desktop for fragmentation, right? That, you know, I've got a Debian here and a SUSE here and an Ubuntu here and a Red Hat here, and I can't just write a Linux app and have it work. That doesn't work, right? And so we've been chasing after 2% of market share, and then we've split it into a million pieces. And then if someone's thinking about writing an app, then like, well, great, I can write this and I can test it on one version of Ubuntu, and then it's not going to work on the next version, doesn't work on Red Hat, actually never mind, screw it. Right, so we've just built this huge disincentive for anyone to participate in the development cycle of joining in to the Linux desktop. And the other thing that Miguel also kind of commented about, you know, he had a big kind of blog post where he explained his, you know, his sad feels about the Linux desktop, that, you know, we are all kind of idealists, tech idealists to some extent. We want to make the API better, we want to make the build system better, we want to be perfect. So we break everything all the damn time. Even when we say we're not going to, we still kind of break it a little bit, but it's okay because, you know, I spoke to my friends and it's fine. Actually, Flatpak solves both of these things, right? You have a Flatpak that can run across a whole bunch of different Linux systems, and you have a runtime that your app chooses, you test and develop against it, and you run against it. So you nail down the interfaces to the desktop, and you nail down the actual binaries you're running against, and we've solved both of these problems. Flathub, right? I talked about this before. Everyone knows what it is. So we have this, you know, source supported by the GNOME Foundation, built and distribution for Linux apps. We're about 650 apps, you know, constant growth to the right. Majority free and open source, and we have a tool that Alex has written, which I think we'll talk about later, but supports the repository behind it, so manages the Flatpak repository. And it's a web service that we can use to update the repository and understand what's in it. So here's the big idea. We want to turn Flathub into a sort of pay-what-you-like app store. So the idea is that we can use the GNOME Foundation as a kind of fiscal sponsor entity, so they can on the legal entity, the legal responsibility for the payments and the liability of actually doing the money changing hands, and lawyers follow. We will target only free software applications. So I mean, there are proprietary apps on Flathub, but they cannot put a price on there. We're going to charge for build and distribution of open source applications only. We're going to do a pay what you like model. So we don't want to create that disincentive. We want to encourage people to pay. You know, I'm thinking, if anyone remembers the original version of Real Player, where it would be like a page of like Real Player Plus, it's amazing, like do this, whatever, and then it'd be a tiny link at the bottom, like no, I really hate freedom. So we really want to encourage people to make contributions and support the ecosystem that they take part in, but we don't want to prevent them from being able to use it. And we need to implement a payment system. So these exist already. Like Stripe, for example, has a marketplace system that actually connects the purchaser directly with the vendor, and you can sort of extract a fee as the marketplace. So you know they handle taking the money from the payments to the publisher, and then you can take a cut. So that's the sustainability point. We can take some fees towards, take a cut towards the fees and the infrastructure to support this. Flathub has established best practices around establishing the owner of an app. You know, we check where the apps come from, like whether it actually comes from the right place, who's actually behind it, you know, are they the upstream, should they have access to it. And I've been working together with Neil, the GNOME Foundation, to put some legal agreements together for Flathub. We need terms of use for the end user, and we need a kind of contribution agreement that establishes Flathub's right to distribute the software. To make this work, we need to have a way for the people who are publishing apps to control what they're doing. Suggested donation, maybe a minimum, maybe not. Let's see how it goes. Probably not. We need to give support to the runtimes and the platforms, right? So application developers rely on the platforms and runtimes that they're building upon, so the tools and the libraries they use. My idea there, which I'm open to sort of discussion on this, but this is my proposal, is that we suggest the app developers will donate a portion of what they get towards these platforms. So, if you're using GNOME one time, then you have a little slider that says, okay, give 5% to GNOME. It doesn't need to be a lot, right? Because the idea is that ultimately we're trying to empower and enable the app developers, and if we do that, then we'll get enough towards GNOME, even by taking a small amount. And then build that functionality over time. We want stats, we want graphs, we want pie charts, we want a spinny counter with a number of dollars, the ability to control where your apps go. I haven't actually designed this, I'm just kind of making up requirements on the fly. We've actually started some of the kind of enabling work, preconditions for this. So we prototyped at Endless a little system for controlling whether you could download an app based on getting a token. The good thing about this is that we can separate the purchasing process, so whether it's an API, whether it's a web app that gives you a token, from the download process. So this is very much how kind of game systems like Steam works. You go through the Steam store, you get a token, then you go to the download server and you can download. So we implemented this in Flat Manager. Well, we started it, Alex finished it, and this we actually control access to a couple of objects in the OS tree repo. So there's a commit object and alternatively a Delta superblock object. But essentially, if you're downloading an app, you need to get one or other of these things in order to know the rest of what you're downloading. This isn't like super secure mandatory access control thing, because this is ultimately not a secure system. Right? You can sideload the app and you can move it. OS tree has peer-to-peer support. You can put on a USB stick and move it somewhere else. So we're not trying to kind of lock this down completely, but we're trying to come up with something that at least requires you to go through the website to see the screen before you go and download the stuff. The good thing about not sort of access controlling and influencing how the majority of the objects are accessed is it's very CDN friendly. Right? So OS tree has a content addressed structure, so those objects can be cached and available for everyone. And when you access a commit object or a superblock object, we can direct that to a different endpoint. So we can have an instance of Flat Manager that can verify the token, and then you can carry on. Everything else can come from the cache and can come from the CDN. And obviously, we can scale that very easily. So, AWS Lambdas or whatever, you can put Flat Managers wherever they need to be in the world to verify those tokens. So this is not going to slow down the downloads for Flathub. We can have as many Flat Managers wherever we need them to do the verification. On the client side, we've adding metadata hints into the repository to make a suggestion or tell the client when the purchase or donation is necessary, so that the right UI can be presented, the right flow can be kicked off. At the API level, when Flatpak determines that a particular transaction or particular operation requires a token, there's a callback, get me a token, put it in, it uses that for the rest of the flow. We have a kind of sketch of a dbus API with a kind of web API to go with it. The idea being that Flatpak can then talk over dbus to an authenticator thing that talks over the web to actually get the token, and that we can configure, for this repo, talk to this web store and kind of pair that up. Maybe we'll write one for Flathub and we'll write one generic one, because the way that you get the tokens, which tokens you need, and sort of what they mean to the other end is specific to your particular repository. So I think we'll have a reference implementation, but it needs to be pluggable so that you can add different ones. How this actually ends up looking, the API, depends a little bit about how the flow works, how the purchasing flow and the end-to-end experience for the user. So there's a little bit of design work here in terms of the interaction design, and then the API and kind of what we plug into which module follows after that. So what do we do next? The design. I'd be very happy to talk to anyone here about the design. Endless has one designer and 20-something engineers, so Robin is very, very busy. We would love to be able to make progress with some of the technical stuff with a good design in hand. So anyone who wants to talk to me about the design of this, I would love to talk to you. We're hoping to actually start work on that web app after this. So we have we have time to start working on that purchasing side so that we can go through a checkout process and to provide some basic controls for publishing apps. And then, obviously, once we have that, we need to integrate it into app centers. So in Endless, we use GNOME software, so that's where we'll send our patches first. And then basically keep working with the GNOME Foundation to actually put in place those kind of preconditions, the kind of legal contracts and signing up the vendors for payment processing and all that good stuff. So that's me. Thank you very much. And welcome any questions.
So, awesome. I'm super excited. I have a question. One thing that we've discovered with the pay-what-you-want model is that users often perceive it as a trial experience. And they say, okay, well, I can pay what I want, so I'm going to download for free right now, and then maybe I'll come back and pay later. So have you thought about any idea how to capture those users? Because that's something that we're really struggling with, is how to get them to come back later and say, okay, I've received value from this, and now that I have another chance to make that decision again.
Yeah, so for the particular implementation for Flathub, we're planning to use JSON Web Tokens, so JWT. So we actually have kind of separate list of verbs and a separate list of, so I want to install these apps or upgrade these apps. So we can, because the client will always bounce through the sort of token process, whatever that is. So we can define the flow there to be whatever we want. So we could keep an account, and we know if someone has downloaded the app already and if it's an upgrade, and then we can decide to show them a different screen or something at that point. Or, so basically nag them every time, or we can have a grace period or something. So we've got the kind of, the implementation allows us to do that. So it's a matter of kind of designer intent. But I think it would be, that's a good lesson that we should take on board. So feel free to help us sketch that out, because we can build that in.
Hi, I love what you're doing with this. I have a question about the pricing for apps. You mentioned that only open source and free software apps will be allowed to have a price on the store and not proprietary ones. Why is that? And based upon your answer, I may have a follow-up question.
Well, I actually have two answers to that question. One of them is because the GNOME Foundation is not going to make a marketplace for proprietary software. I mean, I'm on a board of GNOME Foundation, I would vote against it. The other one is we're planning to build all of this as free and open source software. The idea that anyone could run it, my employer, Endless, may also be interested in running our own copy of it with our own Endless stuff, and that may have different sensitivities. So you can run your own, and hopefully we can come up with some kind of login and passporting and stuff, OAuth, whatever. It's some extent a solved problem, but I don't feel it's consistent with the GNOME Foundation for us to set up a place that you can buy proprietary software. For me, it feels like one step too far.
Follow-up question was, I understand, ethically, and in terms of alignment of ideology, it's not a good idea to have paid proprietary apps. But if they're already gonna be on people's systems, because the services around them require them to exist, and if there's a way for us to, for instance, have a different cut for them, like say 50% of that goes to open source software, it seems like a way we could leverage their existence to further our needs, which is, I think, great thing. If that aligns with our ideologies, we could do. Do you think that's something that could be done? Do you think it's a good idea? Any ideas?
Yeah, I don't. Potentially, yes. I mean, this is this kind of slippery slope, consequentialist argument kind of thing. I mean, some people would say, what's the right amount of proprietary software that you can accept using? It's like, it's none. If we use any, then we've sacrificed the entire universe. And I sort of understand the line of argument. I'm a little bit more of a pragmatist, but then I'm trying to be less controversial here to build consensus around what we have. Flathub was just, we had a GK Hack Fest. We took a day to start talking about Flatpaks, and we just did a web service. So it's incremental, it's iterative. So I think it's a conversation that would be interesting to have. Maybe on discourse, and we can think about that. I, personally, as a sort of GNOME director, it makes me uncomfortable because I think we're sort of enabling and supporting then something that's specifically opposed to what we're trying to do. But is one app less important than getting the user on the desktop? That's the question, right? And it's not one that I personally can answer sort of on the community's behalf. It's something that we need to sort of have an emergent consensus.
Thank you.
Great talk, thank you. You mentioned two subjects. One was making this accessible for people who are in maybe developing nations, and also you talked about minimum pricing. Will you have localized minimum pricing so that the $1 in San Francisco is very different to $1 in Mumbai?
That's a very good question. I don't have an answer to it. Different app stores do different things. Some of them just do a kind of, I'm just going to convert your $3 into £2.47, and some of them apply some kind of rounding and kind of is your pricing like small, medium, or large kind of thing, and then that actually has different local meanings. There are kind of lookup tables, right? The IMF, whatever, gives you a chart of, this is how much $1 is worth, kind of a purchasing power equivalent in different countries. So it's something that you could, apply a computer to. I'm open to suggestions. I don't have an answer to that at the moment. I think actually the bigger problem is not pricing, but it's actually payments.
Right.
So as you roll out through a number of different countries, okay, Stripe, great, US, Western Europe, fine, and then India, oh yeah, sorry, or whatever, right? So I think we're going to have more struggle kind of getting an inclusive system for actually transacting than we are pricing. So pricing would be a nice problem to have, but this is probably the bigger hurdle is to actually get the thing set up in the first place.
So a follow-on question from that then. Do you consider crypto as being an option for taking money from people rather than fiat?
Personally, I hate it, but that's just a personal opinion.
So do I. But
I feel like it's destroying the planet and destroying
those
regulation.
people who don't have vast amounts of fiat but have crypto, they may want to use that. I don't know.
Maybe make it easy for them to give us real money instead, or is there some kind of other service that turns it into real money and then pays? I don't know. It depends. If it's available in a system that that we end up using, then we're not going to turn it off. But I wouldn't necessarily make it a high priority to go out and implement that. When you buy food in the store, they don't usually take Bitcoin. So. Great, thanks so much.